So week 13, right? That's 3rd until the 9th of June. I still got a couple of days left. It's not really filled in, but let's just talk about it nonetheless. So let's start with a stream. Twitch bots. Basically, if you've been following along, you know that I want to go back to Twitch to do Starlight Children's Foundation Charity Month in August, right? It's something that I'm excited to do. And then we get a holiday afterwards. Well, it's not really a holiday. It's I plan on using some PhD funds to go to Canberra because Lady Gaz has a paid conference on, and which is really, really incredible for her. And there's a few academics down that way that I can meet, as well as a whole bunch of resources in the National Library and things like this that I can potentially use. So there's a lot of overlap there for me. So when I say holiday, I kind of mean like intensive PhD time and less streaming time. Maybe. Or we might be able to stream through it. Right? So the Twitch bots is basically like what bots are going to help me produce the stream that I want to do. And there's like 3 or 4 major players that are out there. And let me just say, the bot stuff's totally optional. It's just a nice touch. Because some viewers, like we've got like Scuff, he enjoys using them. And there are many people who enjoy the techie side of Twitch. That's kind of absent on Kick. So Stokes is just jumping on the door, tripping me out. So it's turning out that basically, at this rate, if I have a look at my stream charts, right, which is off, by the way, I've got about 10% more footage. But it's saying here on stream charts, other than the fact that we're in the top 10,000, is that we're approaching 1,500 hours. I've already got 1,500 hours of footage, right? I know I do. I got it on a hard drive. So I don't know why it hasn't recorded here. But basically, when we hit our 2,000, we'll just say 500 hours left, we should hit our 2,000 before Twitch, so I will have time to make overlays and get everything set up for that charity stream. Hopefully I can do some things on set. It's like a resource limitation thing, right? Yeah. And that's what we were doing yesterday morning, like just getting all that footage in order and going, okay, that's season 2, this is season 3. Everything's broken down by the hour. And then I've got a deep dive from that point out. Okay, let's talk about gaming. Gaming is really interesting. I want to talk about Far Cry 5 as well. All right. So, Subpyro and I, we played Dead Island 2 on Xbox Cloud streaming. Right, this is what it is, this Xbox Cloud streaming thing. And yeah, we did Dead Island 2. It's not much of an accomplishment, but it's still an accomplishment, right? We beat the game co-op in 12 hours. They reckon it takes 15, which is pretty neat. And we had fun. Good game. Cool rendition of LA. It made me think that, based on a documentary that we watched, it wasn't a documentary, sorry, it was a really decent YouTube video on Chicago, right? Can't remember which one, but they were talking about how Chicago has underground tunnels and stuff, and I was like, actually, Chicago City might make an interesting place for like a Dead Island type of zombie game, especially if they recycle the map from LA and just continue working on that. I would start us in Chicago, have us go to LA, have us go back to Chicago. I don't know how that would work. Anyway, so we played Dead Island 2, and that worked really well. The biggest issue that we're having is with cloud streaming. Another R18 game. We're playing Yakuza as well. That's also R18. And what's Far Cry 5? MA. Oh, okay. You easily could have made this game R18 as well, based on the themes. Anyway, what was hilarious about Far Cry 5 and why I want to talk about Far Cry 5 is because, is it this video? I know it's done by an hour. Should have been easy for me to find. But basically, like, see if I scroll. This is us getting ready. Do a multiverses. Got to talk about multiverses too, guys. Okay, this is it here. I'm gonna mute it, right? Basically, at one point, and why we're talking about this is, can I find it? Is it in there? So somewhere around here, right? Subpar got stuck in a rock, and why I'm trying so hard to like show you him being stuck in a rock is because of this irony of like this game being like a stellar 9 out of 10 game, and I just had like a terrible experience with it. Here he is stuck in the rock, right? And I'm trying to find where he is to see what I can do to help him. But what I'm getting at is that like the game's a 9 out of 10, universally critically acclaimed or whatever. How is it that we can play it on cloud streaming, you know, and try to do a co-op, and for him to get a game-breaking experience? How? So long after release on something that's meant to be perfectly mature, right? So, for example, it's like Ubisoft. Imagine if Ubisoft had on a carousel all of the Assassin's Creed games, and you were like, wow, very cool. Assassin's Creed games on a carousel. I can play any of these, sir, ma'am? And they're like, yeah. And then you get stuck in a rock and you can't even play the game. Horrible, horrible experience. It was just trash, right? It was so sad, but unbelievably funny and ironic at the time that it just wouldn't work, right? So what I'm trying to say is that there seems to be like hidden gems of games, and then games that are meant to be like, you know, a golden bull or a golden egg, and they just turn out to be not that great. And the other thing is that we got our Hades sub 10 minute time. I don't know if I can pull this video up, what the chances are of me like finding it, you know, right off the bat, but we can try. Might not be that one. Oh well. Either way, I should have like bookmarked this. We got all sorts of stuff, PhD stuff to talk through there. I don't know if this is going to be the video or not. Nope. That was a 12. Anyway, you have to believe me, it's in one of these files. We got our sub 10 minute on Sword, unseated, unmodded, glitchless. Pardon me. Glitchless. And that was really great. I really, really liked that. It was really hard to do, and now we're up to the next weapon, Spear, which is really hard to do as well. Right, now let's talk about the PhD. We've got the games direction and COC part 1 due. I think last week, basically the thing that happened last week was we were supposed to get the Swiftologist, so the person who does the Taylor Swift research, but we couldn't link up with them. No idea what happened, just didn't. So, you know, one of those classic cases of like, yes, 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 and then just poof, gone. So that's okay. whatever. Maybe, see, most people who actually know who I am will take the time and not treat me that way. But if you get treated that way, don't worry. I've experienced it too. Right. We got printing is probably the third thing, which is huge. So, like, I don't actually know what's going on with my ability to print at the university. No one's spoken to me or whatever. You know, like, I've been here. You've seen my inbox, right? I'm an internal on-campus student, meant to have like a little desk and stuff. I haven't got any email or anything being like, please come and get a student ID. How long do you reckon I can do this PhD for without ever getting a student ID? Right? Bearing in mind I was in that master's program for 2 years, never had to get one. It doesn't matter. Anyway, going the wrong direction. We got printing, right? So you know how, like, I wanted to bring the project to this university so that way we could work with Lady Gaz, and we got told yes, but then they were like no, because they didn't like it. They don't like a family team doing this. But if you're indigenous, then you learning with your family, or like your knowledge elder in your family, or the senior woman, is perfectly fine. But if you're not indigenous, it breaks research ethics. Okay? You also get there's like lots of support for you if you're indigenous as well, which is great at this university. I'm not saying anything bad or whatever. I got mine. Okay, don't worry about me. But we got printing. And what Lady Gaz is going to do for me is, because I can't print and they can, and they want to do this type of game studies research as well, right? She's more interested in the serious games type of thing, and I'm more interested in the games game, right? That's not to say that I'm not into serious games. I'm just into my games because they're fun. I'm trying to have fun. The reason why printing matters is because I spend way too much time on the PC and I want to physically read on paper. I love that feeling. Yeah, and that's what I did in my undergraduate as well. So COC Part 1, this is what we were trying to do early with Tara. And then Tara told me to go away, to put it politely. So we need an agreement between myself and my supervisor that we're going to play by the rules, basically. And that I've read policy, and they've read policy. Easy. That's due at the end of the month. Same with my literature review draft. So I'm going to send that next week. We'll get that done, and then we'll do the literature review. All it is a form. So we might wait until the same time as the literature review, so that way everything's done simultaneously. Not a big deal. Doesn't really matter. This is already complete. It just needs to be filed. Okay, the games direction thing is very interesting. So this is pretty elaborate, right? This is pretty elaborate. Let me take you over here and show you what we were starting with. Basically, my supervisor said, think about the scope for which games you're interested in and why. Thank you very much. And prior to that, Lady Gaz and I were like, 4 games should be sufficient for the size of the thesis and this project. But it's complicated because I want my theory and I want my contribution to apply broadly to video games. So I have to touch on a lot of different titles, and I have to touch on a lot of different genres and stuff. And then it started to get very complicated very fast, right? So let's kind of talk through this and see what we can garner, right? So there's some stuff happening in the background. I apologize if you can hear that. So my supervisor goes, think about the scope of which games you're interested in and why. And then talking with my chat and my stream, I'm like, pardon me, I'm like, what games do I actually want to play and investigate? You know what I mean? Because I have to do this. So there's no point me going, I want to be exploring concepts of eliteness and elite players and elite gameplay in visual novels, Doki Doki Literature Club, and all sorts of ecchi stuff. Or Roblox. It's like, I want to be the Roblox guru. It's like, no. Yes, but no. Right? Do you still love Warcraft, Gaz? And it's like, yeah, I do. Alright, maybe we can do Warcraft. So what are these 1, 2, 3, 4? What does this all mean? Okay. Basically, you know, we've got a 5-factor model, right? Well, that's not enough for me. I know there's lots of nuances about video games, and I broke those nuances down to help me select a game. So the first direction on our little diamond compass thing is the forms of play. So that's to say, like, games have rules, games have ways in which you play them, right? The person who made the game wants you to play the game a certain type of way, right? If you have kids or whatever, kids will want to play the game, they want to play it between themselves, even if it's just like this game called Tip. If you get touched, you're it, right? Every kid, every group all over the world have different rules for how they want to play it, and they have different ways to play the same game, right? So the 4 forms of play that I was interested in as being distinct from, hey, this is the game, this is Monopoly, for example, play Monopoly. I was like, yes, but do you know that people play Monopoly in a different way? And that different way of play sometimes can exhibit the things we're looking for, as in like eliteness, outliers of significance. And so 4 of the things here are modders, hunters, runners, and trophies. So modders means, in video game world, people who have a video game and they modify that game so that way they can play it the way they want to play it, right? This one's huge. Hunters means that people are playing a game and they're hunting for a specific thing. Usually it's a glitch. Usually it's if it's a specific game thing, right, that they are hunting and they only want that, usually it's going to turn into like a speed run. So that's why we have runners, speed runners, people who play the game as fast as possible to reach a particular state or a goal in that game. So for me in Hades, it is to beat the game as fast as possible without modifying the game or using any glitches, right? And then finally, trophies. This is kind of like a new completionist type of play that came about in the early 2000s once video games started to get more account orientated and developers and publishers had the ability to track what you were doing in the game, right? And so basically people thought it would be cool if there were additional goals or challenges put into the game. And this has always been a thing, but now it's more of an organized thing. And if you collect all the trophies that the developers have decided are in the game, right? These prizes or these special tasks, then you're like a trophy hunter in a way. And if you do them all, you get a platinum trophy. And there's statistics and ranks, and you become a right proper gamer. For Microsoft, I believe you get points. I don't know where they are exactly. Does it show my points? Nowhere easily or obvious. But yeah, it says here, like in Far Cry 5, 20 out of 1695 points and 1 trophy. Dead Island, 230 out of 1300, 22 trophies. So whilst I completed the game, right, and I beat the story in 12 hours and I'm satisfied and I'm happy, if you look at this, how could I possibly be an elite gamer? I haven't even done 18% of it, right? This is something that we're going to have to unpack. Now, I hope you can appreciate some of the things I'm saying, because it's like, in Hades, I have like none of that stuff. I don't care about it. I don't, but I'm the fastest in the world at what I do. You know, does one invalidate the other? I don't know. And if you don't think about that kind of stuff and then you're picking games, you could be in trouble. All right. So that's the first consideration. The second consideration is about the nature of the games being competitive or non-competitive, single or multiplayer experience, aka the versus or the cooperative games. These are massive multiplayer online games like World of Warcraft, where thousands of people join each other in very small groups of like, well, I don't know what a raid size is today, under 10 maybe? It used to be 40. Royales. This is the kind of game like Fortnite, where it's like a whole bunch of players, a lot of people and bots, all like appear on a really big map, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller as the player base gets whittled down due to the competition. Arenas, where it's like 3 of you or 2 of you versus 3 of them or 2 of them or whatever, you know, and it's a face-off. You're coming in, you're gonna butt heads. And then MOBAs. These are like the top-down looking perspective games where you control individual units. This kind of took over the real-time strategy genre type of thing. And that's not to say that RTS games shouldn't make this cut. I'm just saying, let's just pick these 4 things. Because these versus kind of games are the games that are predominantly in the esports championships, right? What I should do is have one thing here, which is actually pretty important, and let's call it races, right? Because I thought of the example of Counter-Strike Surf. So Counter-Strike Surf is a kind of like a racing mini game, side game, it's a modification of the original game that has just as much relevance in the elite scene of Counter-Strike as the main game, right? For that subset community, in my view, and I respect that. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you were to only pick versus games or esports titles, then you might be missing out on all of the elite players that are in the forms of play category that don't want to play in an organized competitive setting, right? Not everybody wants to be in an organized competitive setting. Yeah? Not everybody thrives in that. So, platforms. This is handhelds, PCs, consoles like PlayStation, Xbox, cloud gaming like how we were doing with the Microsoft gaming, analog games like board games and dice games and Dungeons and Dragons. I know the thing is the research is predominantly computer game based. However, a lot of these analog games have digital counterparts or components, right? And they're becoming more half and half, and it's something that I want to explore. Augmented reality games and virtual reality games. Platforms change over time, so usually decadally. there will be like a PlayStation, PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in the future PlayStation 6. It's important to appreciate elite gaming by the platform, because different platforms allow for different ways of play. Some platforms can be modified, some can't. Some you can cheat, some you can't. Some have one version of the game that lends itself well to this, but not that. You see that a lot in speedrunning. So if you're going to pick a game, you got to be like, what platform? Where does it actually get played? How does it all come together? And then finally, it's possible to completely miss all the simulation and serious games that happen with PCs. So simulations and serious games are usually like a video game thing that's semi-educational, right? So it involves a computer, and it's meant to simulate something serious in life, but we're using it for play to help us learn. Sims and serious games also include sports games, and by sports games, I'm keeping it really broad. Everything from like golf simulators to flight simulators to driving simulators to FC24, FIFA type of thing. And then finally, semi-utility kind of games, whereby my classic example of this is like a game that has a kind of real-world connection. So Command Air and Sea, for example, that's like a military-based simulation engine. That game has like a professional edition that's actually used for military training purposes, and that has some kind of utility that's ancillary to education, and it's like just as how you have when I was in the national security research community, you have like games for national security purposes. You're going to have elite players of those games who are trying to do incredible things. Right. I have further considerations based on the 5 factors as well. But just to talk to this particular slide, right? The games are, I just said Pokemon. Hang on, there's something that I need to tell you first. And it's on this, it's in the F1 game considerations. It's here. So on the next slide I'll show you the 5-factor model first. So it's a game, description, competition, achievement, acquisition. Each one of those factors I feel has considerations. So for the game that you're going to choose, right, outside of those 4 directions for games that I just showed you, the game itself, questions and considerations that I have is, does it meet NVIDIA 240? So basically the research saying you get you play better if you have a higher frames per second in certain titles, right? More is more power makes you better. And then I'm asking the question of like, what about Nintendo? And so, if you're only picking if you're only picking titles that conform to that NVIDIA research of hitting 240 frames per second and playing them, what does that mean for other games? Where you have elite players. And that's why I thought of Pokemon, because you have elite Pokemon players, they're only playing at sub 30 frames. So what does that mean? I know different titles, different purposes, yada yada. It gets complicated fast. Finally, the narrative elite, the intrinsic versus extrinsic value sourcing. So what I'm trying to say is if we look at some of these games that I've suggested, like Pokemon, Counter-Strike, all the Craft games from Blizzard, or the Tekken Souls game from Bandai Namco and Japanese developers, Fortnite, FIFA iRacing, Flight, right? You'll notice that some of these games try to connect to general video game genres. as well. Well, narrative elite for intrinsic versus and extrinsic value sourcing is to say, if you narrativize a game and then analyze that narrative and that game as text for themes of elite, to say, hey, we've identified elite themes, and therefore, because elite themes exist in the game, then like by extension, you could have a player of this game that adopts these elite characteristics. So that's to say, because elite is in the game, it's possible to be an elite gamer of that game. So what's a good example of this? I'm trying to think of a game. Let's just pick Pokemon here because it's just there, right? Imagine a Pokemon game that didn't have the Elite Four, right? So in Pokemon, the top bosses are the Elite Four. You become an elite Pokemon trainer in that game, right? It's bread and butter. You could be an elite player of the game because it's just all part of the narrative, part of the story, part of the experience of that game. That's just the whole point. That's the whole point of the game, is to become an elite Pokemon trainer. If there was another game that didn't have any narrative elements about being elite, like Uno, like there's probably virtually no narrative elements surrounding Uno. There's probably more narrative elements surrounding Monopoly. Well, in Uno, we all know that there's probably guaranteed to be an elite card player person out there, right? But that eliteness isn't coming from the narrative, it's coming from an extrinsic source. That's the distinction, right? So it's to balance the consideration of, if there's no elite themes, can you really be an elite gamer of the thing that has no elite themes? Because it's not part of what it is, right? You're going to have to get that eliteness from somewhere else and tack it on. And then finally, generation, or the temporal aspect. So Pokemon goes all the way from being played on a Game Boy platform that's black and white, that only has enough battery for like 1 day at a time, for example, versus Pokemon today, where you have, you know, a Switch with a power bank. You can play 24/7, and you can battle people anywhere via Bluetooth. Crazy differences, right? To compare an elite gamer of two different generations and whether or not one would be an elite gamer today or not. This is kind of what makes traditional sports and stuff so fascinating, is because like you can appreciate a, like let's in Australia, or let's just try to keep it more universal, right? Let's just take shot put, the thing where you go, huh, right? An elite shot putter from 200 years ago, or a weightlifter from 200 years ago in the Olympic sport, still going to get the same respect and understanding and all this stuff as someone in a contemporary capacity lifting those weights today. It's just more modern today. But if you were to take like the elite gamer from Game Boy on Pokemon and then put them on Pokemon Go or whatever, it's like, it's non-transferable. It's not the same thing, whilst still being potentially the same thing. Pokemon. You see how it's like an apples to oranges type of comparison. So guys, this is basically where I'm at. I went ahead and added additional considerations for the other factors. And I'm going to need literature for all of this stuff, right? And I don't know how far I'm going to get by the time that we have the meeting. However, what I want to have is the games locked in. So I can tell my supervisor, I'm looking at these 4 things, and I've got, let's just say, 4 games or 4 franchises in general or whatever. And you can see I don't have any Chinese game, Oriental games here, indigenous games here, right? You know what I mean? Like there's gaps. I need to be more critical. But I'm hoping I can get the games and franchises locked in, and then a whole bunch of referencing and supporting documents so I can explain what these titles are and how they are compatible with these 4 considerations, as well as the considerations for the 5 factors in the model. Then once we have those titles, then the next steps are going to be like getting all the equipment ready so I can play them at NVIDIA 240 type of thing. And then continuing on with the literature review to fulfill all of this kind of stuff, like explaining what's obvious to me and determining the story that we're telling in the thesis. There's a little bit more to it than that. Hello, Hatto. We're going to have all the methods and theories, including the top 10 authors, right? All of these things here are going to get updated because we've come further. There's more ludology stuff to look into. The five-factor model literature, and then we have these specific searches that we've got to get into. So, you know, the conversation theory, ludology versus narratology in the essence of game studies, narrativizing games further. This one was interesting from Lex Friedman, the Ghazali's research in attention through video games. That is to say that we can like power up our minds through video games, but it's more scientific than what we're doing. Semiotics, so symbology, looking at the aestheticization of elite performance in gaming today and through time, and plays an anthropological category that shapes culture and reflects it, right? And being able to distill that further. There is one other thing that came up for a specific search that needs to be narrowed down, and it is one of these tabs here. I'm looking for it. This, the Ludomusicology Society of Australia. This is actually really interesting, right? So it's about the academic study of video game and computer game music. This is really interesting to me because, right, when I play Hades and I get all my scores, I don't listen to the music. I put on my own music. I want to do it my way, right? And I'm thinking that music is one of the things, when we were doing Remnant 2, it's like the boss music was adding to the intensity of the fight. One way you make the fight easier, and this is something that we had to do in Armored Core 6, was the music, the way it was coming across on my equipment. I couldn't hear the audio cues to get out of the way for the boss fight, so I was always getting hurt. So I had to get rid of the music in order for me to play it properly, right? And let's just say you're neurodiverse and you can't hack that intensity all at once. You can beat it, you just can't hack it all at once because your brain's different, right? If you were to be like, okay, we're playing Armored Core 6, robots, missiles, big crazy stuff, instant deaths, all this sort of stuff, you know, stun locks. You're like, I can't do it to this music. Whatever. Maybe you need to be like Rival Gaz and put on the Mario game music. And now you listen to Mario and you're like, actually, total change of mindset. This is easy. Left, right, I win. You know, but the big gloomy music's just totally throwing you. This is all about the video game design, the aesthetic of the game, the direction, the effect, right? What I do, and what many elite gamers do, I envision, is deconstruct the game so that way they can just achieve. It's kind of like a chef, right? A chef is just going to deconstruct all the food and ingredients so you can have a delicious meal. You know, and sometimes the view from the chef is very different from the view from the eater. So like the view from the elite gamer is going to be very different from a casual enjoyer. Not in a bad way, not in an elitist way. That is another conversation for later in the subculture of video games. How come, you know, gatekeeping and all this kind of stuff exists, the tiers and hierarchy exist. Like we got that emote from Hato before, right? And he was playing a game called, I'm going to wrap this up now. Click here. He was playing this game called Lies of P, right? And games like that are designed to be inherently challenging, but also completely possible to beat once you figure it out, right? It's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. When you figure it out, you're like, actually, a goldfish could beat Elden Ring. And it happens. Same with Hades. It's actually pretty easy once you figure it out. However, as streamers, right, and people who share our games, how we play is very different to how the average person plays. And this is something else that we need to be exploring in this PhD as well. But if you've looked and you followed along with everything that we're doing, it is not going to be something that's going to be a primary focus. It's more than likely going to be something that's going to end up in a journal article or whatever. So to kind of summarize the PhD so far and how it's all going to work is I'm a streamer, I'm a gamer, fancy myself an elite one. I play a character known as Rival Gaz on the stream that I produce here in Darwin, Australia. Right, 7 days a week on Kick at present. Follows along with the story of Rival Gaz and Real Gaz as he does his PhD into this whole thing. It's a very sort of Truman Show, self-reflective activity that we're undertaking here, and how it all comes together. So like this segment here, this is real. You're talking with me, Gary Lee. But the show on the stream with Rival Gaz, it's its own thing. You know, he's the streamer from the future, the best friend you never had. The character is meant to be your friend. You know, he's meant to be a streamer. He's meant to be a gamer. And all his quirks and parody of myself are supposed to come through. In that, we produce all of this, all right, and we take all the experiences, Discord, Kick, Twitch, the stickers, the website, the merch, the screen clippings, everything that kind of comes in and about for being a streamer, being a thing like this, and the gamer, right? And by the end of the PhD 3-year period, we should have an abundance of materials, digital and physical, to make artifacts, both physical and digital, ideally to be exhibitioned, ideally as a deconstructed stream that has proofs and ways of knowing and seeing and experiencing elite gameplay, right? That's half the thesis. The other half is the exegesis thesis component of the thesis, which is we do a reading into all of that content that gets made. And the 50,000 words that we have to explain it as it aligns with this vision of coming to know a 5-factor model of elite gameplay. We subsequently need to have all of the literature and theory supporting this methodology, this approach, the model, being able to show the gaps in the problems and as to why my model helps with these gaps and problems. Yeah? And we come to know the answer of the question, what is elite gaming? Right? We come to know it through the 5-factor model as it's constructed in the literature or based thereof and my experiences ethnographically, as well as, and this is the part where we're going to need ethics for, is we're going to need ethics for the use of my stream, I feel, but maybe not. Maybe not. Like if I was a musician, would I need ethics for the use of my own music? I'm not sure. It depends on the university. But ethics for surveys and interviews, because we're working with like other humans. Don't forget, guys, the show is produced not by the university. The show is produced by me, Gary Lee, with Gary's House of Content, based here in Darwin, Northern Territory. Right? I could produce a stream for you or your business or whatever, but I'm doing this. Or YouTube content, or like how the Array contacted, well, that person from Tangled Ventures, the NFT card game, contacted me because of something they're trying to attempt to do with the Array here in Darwin. The Array being an attempt at becoming a peak body for video games here in the territory. I don't even know if it's government owned or not. I can't kind of figure it out. It just seems like a Nepo kid project, if I'm honest. But hopefully someone can explain it to me. One last thing that did come up is there was a mental health challenge by, I think it's like takethis.org or takethis.gg. It's an American mental health gaming outfit. Really cool stuff that they do. They have a thing cooking up with Riot Games where you can basically be like a mentee in a program, and you go through all their training and stuff and learn more about mental health in games, right? And I would love to do that. I would. But two things. I feel like I'm too old. I'm not an American. They're all based in America. And the requirement is that you're like an ally, you know, but like I'm not hanging out with marginalized groups every day. I'm at home, you know. I kind of understand the plight and stuff, but I'm not surrounded by Palestinians or whatever, you know. Someone like me I'm just poor. And being poor isn't like a marginalized group. That's just, you suck at life. Period. You know what I mean? Like, no one kept me down. It's just my circumstance. I was looking at like that YouTube video of Chicago, right? And so Obama was a professor at my age. I wonder how successful I would be if I was in Chicago instead of Darwin. Because you can only do what you can do with the resources around you. You can only, even though the expression like, my environment is a product of me, not I'm a product of my environment. These sort of environmental factors are very real, right? And it's something that I'm coming to appreciate. And I know that like I would not be where I am if it were not for the distilled simplicity of being in Darwin, right? I know that. And I know that Lady Gaz wouldn't be having the career head start that she's having if she wasn't here. But, you know, I'm getting asked to work for free for the Array to help them win a grant in the future. What would I be doing if I was in LA? Look at all the stuff I've achieved in my careers. to date in Australia, and I wonder how far I would be if I was where the action really is. It's been on my mind because I look at everyone who's getting ahead and doing this stuff on LinkedIn, and I'm like, it's getting me down. That's why I was interested in the mental health thing, because like video games, and then if you look at like Amir Satvat's Discord community and his LinkedIn community and everything that they're trying to do for people in the video game industry with the layoffs and stuff, it's like, it's so important, the other half of the mental health coin, because everyone's working hard to make sure you have fun. But then who's working hard to make sure that the people who are making sure you're having fun are having fun? They're just getting used and spat out. It's really tough. Alright guys, so that's everything that I have to say for now. And I'll catch you for the next PhD update next Friday. We find out about the scholarship by the end of the month, so going to be like another 2 or 3 updates later. Okay, and speaking of later, so